Hey guys, welcome back to a new YouTube video. It has been a while. Today I want to build like a little bookmark manager, just a small app to sort of check out Nuxt 3 and see how we can integrate some databases, sqlite or something like that. It's a fun little project, so stick around and enjoy. Alright, so this is what we'll be building. It's just like a little input with an add button, and then you can see all these links I've already added, but all you do is just do HTTPS and then whatever site you want. So let's say twitter.com, and if you press enter it adds it, fetches the icon. If you reload the page, everything is still there. These icons are nice and cached. And I'll show you where these icons come from, a free little API that we can use to display these icons. So if I click on Vue.js, it'll take me to the Vue.js website, and it's just a small little bookmark manager app that just helps with, I don't know, maybe just organizing your daily stuff. So let's get started. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a command called npx. So if you don't know what that is, first of all, you'll need to install Node from your onto your system, and you can get that from nodejs.org. If you download that and install it, you'll have npx available. So you can check if you have Node by doing node-v, and then obviously I'm on a little bit of an old version of Node because 18 is the new stable version. So if you have 18, that's fine. Okay, so let's clear that out, and then npx comes with the installation of Node. npm is like the module repository, so where everyone puts their code for you to download and use in your code, and npx is the same type of thing, except this is an executable sort of binary, and not a package that you import into your code. Once you do npx, it's going to download the binary and run it immediately. So what we're going to do is say npx nuxi, which is the binary by Nuxt themselves, and then we say init, and then I'm just going to say bookmarker. That's the app's name. And then if you press enter, it might ask you to install the nuxi command first, but if you've got it, that's fine. So now it's created a new project, so we can go into the project with cd bookmarker. And if we do an ls, you can see it's just like 5 files that they've downloaded. You can install your dependencies, but you can do it with npm install, but I want to use pnpm. If you don't have pnpm, I'm pretty sure you can do npm i-g pnpm. If not, just Google pnpm and check out the installation process. But I'm pretty sure I already have pnpm installed, which I do. So all I have to do now is say pnpm install, and then I'm going to add the -- shamefully voiced option, and this just helps with the I believe there's like a little bit of symbolic linking going on, and I've had issues with that, so shamefully voiced helps. So that'll install your dependencies, and as you can see, I'm downloading very few and reusing many because I already have these cached on my system. So that's why I like pnpm, because it's a little bit quicker, and it also doesn't bloat up your system. So that has finished installing. So you can see that types generated in .nuxt. So we've added a new folder called .nuxt, which just basically generates types for you. So what we can do now is, let's just do a pnpm run dev, because that's in, let me show you, cat package.json. That's the file. We only have one dev dependency, which is Nuxt, and they have all their dependencies hidden within their package. And these are the scripts available. So we want to run dev. So let's do pnpm run dev. And this port was already used, so that's fine. I'll just use the new port 3001. And as you can see, this is like the Nuxt sort of welcome page. Very pretty actually. And Nuxt just became version 3 stable. So yeah, you should definitely use Nuxt. It's an awesome framework, and I can't wait to make more videos about it if my time allows it. Okay, so let's close down that, and we can actually stop this server for now and just open it up in VS Code. I'm going to bring VS Code full screen over. There we go. Okay, so now we're in VS Code, and we basically have just a few files and folders over here. You can see there's a .gitignore. I'm going to start out with just adding a .data to the gitignore, because that helps with we'll be using sqlite, which is just like a small database that uses SQL queries, but it's just a file on your system. And it's pretty much the syntax is interchangeable with MySQL or MySQL. But yeah, so let's create a new .data/db.sqlite, just so that we have that around, but we're not going to use it for now, but we'll use it soon. All right, so where do we get started? So Nuxt has an app.view, which basically they import this component, which is that thing that you saw on the page. Let's actually start with the server-side logic first. I like having my core logic finished so that I know I can call it from the front end. And as you might know, Nuxt is a full stack framework. So we have this front end and we have the back end. So like a server that we can call via API. And the server will be basically just responsible for reading and writing data from the database. Okay, cool. So I'm going to create a new directory called server, and then I'm going to create a directory within that called source, and then I'm just going to make a file called bookmark.ts, and this is basically like an entity. That's fine. That's fine. So bookmark is an entity, and you typically, like, I like making my entity files separately, so I can also do something like database.ts, which we'll use a little bit later. Okay, so let's start with bookmark. So the way I'm going to do this is, I'm not going to do it the class way, sort of object oriented. I'm just going to write some functions, and we'll start with just in-memory data. So we'll start with like a fake database that just says bookmarks is equal to that. So this will keep all our temporary in-memory data while we just build out the logic. And then what we'll do is we'll define a interface for the bookmark, and an interface is basically just like a blueprint of what the type should look like, the object that you're saving. And I'm gonna do interface bookmark with a capital B, and a bookmark should have an ID, which will be a string, and a bookmark should have a URL, obviously, which will also be a string. A bookmark should have, in our case, an icon. It doesn't really need one, but so we could do like icon is optional, but I'm going to make it required for now, and I'm going to make it an object which also has a URL, which would also be a string, and I'm going to give it a version. Maybe one day we'll use the version. I'll do this number. Maybe one day we'll use the version as sort of a way to bypass the cache of the icon. What else do we need? We could add a title. I don't think that's necessary for now. Let's just do a let's do created at, which should be a date, and we can do a updated at, which should also be a date. And this is basically just a template. This isn't creating any JavaScript. It's just telling us in TypeScript what we need. Okay, so now we have an interface for a bookmark. So typically with like the backend core logic, you have methods like get by ID, or list them out, or update them, or delete them. I think for this example, let's start with just the listing method and adding, because once the page loads up, we want to list all our bookmarks that we have in our database. If there's nothing, we basically just say, sorry, you don't have any bookmarks. And if we want to add them, then they get added to this fake database over here that we have. And what we can do now is just give this a strong type. which is bookmark array, just to make sure that we can only add bookmarks to that. And I'm pretty sure we can just make this a const as well. If we wanted to sort of change the array completely, then it can't, but I think we'll just be pushing into this. We won't be having a delete for now. We'll just have a list and a create. So let's export an async function called, let's start with list. And the listing doesn't take any parameters, it just lists everything we have. Maybe if you have users, you could be like user ID over here and then only list for that user. But in this case, it's just us, so that's not a problem. And then all we have to do in this case is just say return bookmarks. Super easy, because it's not a database. We don't have to read it, we don't have to do anything. We just literally return the array as is. So that's our listing done for now. And we can export another function called add. And add will, function add, and add will accept some options and we'll give that a type. So let's create a type for the add options. So we can say interface add options. We could say that the only thing we really need is a URL, because this is the only thing coming from the user. The rest of this stuff we can generate based on the URL, the date we have control of, the ID we have control of. So we can give this a type of add options. And I actually want to use a little dependency here, and I might just install all the dependencies now that we'll be using. And I think it's just 2, so not a big list of dependencies. So what I'll do is I'll say pnpm add, and then the first dependency will be atdatabases / sqlite, and the second one would be Zod. And what these are, databases at SQLite, is basically just a little, a good library for writing SQL queries and connecting to a database, in this case SQLite, SQLite, whatever. But they also have MySQL, Postgres, everything. So if you want to swap out your databases for something that's actually connects with like a TCP socket or something like MySQL or so, then you can use that. But I'm just going to use SQLite for this example. And then Zod is it's a schema, it's sort of a schema validation library. So we'll be using Zod right now. We'll still wait a little bit before we use the SQLite thing. So let's import Zod. We can do import z from Zod. And Zod is great because it provides, nice types and everything for us to use. So what we want to do is we want to validate this input that the user is giving to us. And the way we do that is we can just say const add options schema will be equal to z.object, because it's an object. And then we can specify what's in this object, the shape. We want a URL, and that URL should be of type z.string.url. So they even make sure that it's a valid URL, which is awesome. So now we have this schema, and the way we can validate this. So what we want to do is if the user adds it with invalid data, then the function should just throw, and that's about it. So we can just say that const params equals the add option schema dot parse the options that's been passed to the function. So now we have the params, and if you hover over this, you can see that it's nicely typed, which comes from Zod, which is great. And then now what we can do is just generate a new bookmark object and add it to our bookmarks. So let's do const bookmark is a type of bookmark, just to make it explicit so it helps us with a little bit of autocomplete. So first of all, ID. And I'm just going to use node for this, and the way we can do that is just import random UUID from node crypto. And we can just, for the ID, we just generate a random UUID. Easy. So you'll see that there's missing properties. We need a few things still. So let's see what's next. I want to do the URL next, and that's basically just params.url. Simple as that. And then we have the icon. So the icon has a URL as well, and this URL is something that we'll use an external library for. We'll get it from an external library. So let me just grab that URL quickly. Okay, so we need the URL for the icon, and what I'll do is I'll create a new file called utils.ts, and then I'm going to export a function called generate icon URL, and this will take a URL which is a string. So this is the URL that the user added, and we're going to turn it into, we're going to use some parts of it to make an icon URL. So first we need to get the domain. So let me just so let's get the domain. So we'll do const domain equals new URL from that URL dot hostname, and then we can return this string. So basically this is like a hidden Google API, free to use for now. I'm sure they'll probably put some gate on that at some point, but for now it's free. If you call this endpoint, they'll send you back the favicon of that website. Pretty cool. And basically you just add the domain, and you can add different sizes here, but I felt that the 256 works the best. Okay, so we have that function now. So let's go back to our bookmark, and then we import that. You could say import from utils, and that was called generate icon URL. And then we basically just call it here. And params.url. So that will generate our URL for us. And then for the version, for now, we'll just insert it as the date.now, because version is a number. And then created at would be a new date, and updated at would be a new date. Perfect. So we have the entire bookmark that we can save now, and basically all we need to do is just say bookmarks.push this bookmark, and then return the bookmark. We could return all the bookmarks perhaps, so that we have an updated list, but let's just return the one that was created. I think that makes more sense. And there we have it. So we have basically our sort of basic little entity created over here, and now we can use it in the API. So the way you make an API with Nuxt 3 is you go to the server folder, and then you create a new folder called API, and then I'm going to create a subfolder called bookmarks, and then a file called index.get.ts. So the way this file naming works is that it creates the routes based on this file structure. So if you go /API/bookmarks, it doesn't need the index, but it knows this is a GET request. So you actually put the HTTP method within your file name, and it automatically maps everything in the API folder. It maps to API endpoints, which is pretty cool. So the way you define a handler or like an endpoint is you say export default of a type of define event handler, and this event handler can be async, that takes an event. And then what we need is I'm going to import star as bookmarks from source, and then bookmark, and then all we basically need to do is just say return bookmarks.list. And now you can see if I hover over this, it already knows what types is going to be sent back. We're going to send back a bookmark array, which is pretty cool. And this is async for now, because once we start actually reading from the database, it needs to be async. Another way we can specify this is by doing like this, and then server source bookmark, because these are mapped to the root instance. It looks a little bit better than dot 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 dot. Okay, so we have that, and we also want an endpoint for create. So let's create a new file called create dot post, because this is a post request. And then we do the same thing, export default, define event handler, and this takes an async event. And this event is basically like in Express, you have request and response and everything. So with this event, you can read the request body and set some headers and stuff like that. Okay, so let's get the body. And the way you do that is say const body equals await read body, and you pass it the event. And this will give you like a JSON sort of shape of the content that was passed in the body of the request. And we don't have to validate it over here because it's being validated in our entity. So all we have to do now again is just import star as bookmarks, server source bookmark. And the reason I do this is like, let's say you add another entity. So this has methods in here called add and list. So I can do that, but what if we add more entities? So I sort of give this a namespace instead of just importing the add and list and stuff. You could say add bookmark or list bookmarks too, up to you. You prefer importing single functions. All right, so now what we can do is basically just say return bookmarks.add the body, because we expect the body to look like this, something, you know. And even if it doesn't look like that, it's fine. Our validator will fail, and Nuxt will return that error to the front end, and we can handle those errors. We could do a try catch and maybe send a custom error response, but I think for now this will be fine. And so there we have it. We have our two endpoints, create and just the listing. So now we can actually start using it in the front end. Let's go to app.view. We'll just keep it app.view. We don't need pages for now. And then in here, I'm going to start off dead simple. We need a script tag as well. So I'm going to do script. The language is TypeScript. And it's a setup script. All right. So now we have, I'm going to give this a little bit more semantics and just call it main. So now we have this, and the first thing we want to do, let's start with the data. So we can do const and then in brackets there's two things that we'll do, and I'm going to use async data, and async data takes a handler, an async handler that takes the Nuxt app as an argument, but we don't need that for now. And then I'm basically just going to return a global called fetch. And if I do, so now you'll see there's no suggestions. So now if I hover on data, there you go, you can see it gives bookmark. And if I do this, you can see it tells me the endpoints that are available. So pretty neat. Now we have that. So basically we can already run this. We can do that. Open this up. Let it load. And we'll just see a white screen. That makes sense. Okay, so looks like everything's working. There's no errors. Let's continue along. So the first thing I want to do is let's just get that logic out of the way. So pending will be true as long as the data is still loading. So what we can do is we can create a div that just says if data is pending just say loading. And then we can say another div, and this will be a v else. So if it's not pending, but also we need to make sure that there is bookmarks. So I'm going to name this data a little bit better so it's more clear what we're doing. And then we can say if bookmarks, so it's giving me null as an option. So we can say if bookmarks and bookmarks.length is bigger than 0. And then we do a final one that says v else. So no bookmarks yet, ... So this is basically just checking if it's loading. This is if it's done loading, then it's going to check if there are bookmarks. If there aren't bookmarks, it's going to say no bookmarks yet. So let's just list out what there is. So we can do a ul and then an li and then just say v4 bookmark in bookmarks and then give it a key of bookmark.id. So we have some nice autocomplete over here, and then we can just maybe list the URL for now. So we can say bookmark.url. And obviously I think this isn't going to show any bookmarks. So no bookmarks yet, and very ugly styling. Okay, so we need a form to add bookmarks. So let's add that. And that's going to go right at the top of the page. I'm just going to say form, and then we can do an add submit.prevent. And we can add an input of type URL so that it does some nice validation for us. Just give it some values. I'm going to give it a label and say add bookmarks. And then obviously a button that just says add. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so now we got an ugly form. We'll do the styling in just a little bit. I like getting the logic done first, you know. Okay, so we have the bookmarks over there. Now we need a place to model this input value. So this input, as we type into it, we need to store that in some sort of variable so that it's reactive. And the way I'm going to do that is say new bookmark equals a reference that is at first just an empty string. All right, so I'm going to put some required stuff on this, and yeah, that's about it. And then we need to do a v model, and we can say new bookmark. And just to see this, we can add a div that just has the new bookmark value in there. Nothing's happening. Let me refresh. Ah, there we go. So as we type that, you know, that URL is getting populated. So that's all good. Now what we can do is basically we just need to create a method that actually calls this, so or goes to our API. So what we can do is just say const add bookmark equals an async function that doesn't take anything, and what we, let's just say if new bookmark.value is equal to empty, just don't do anything, because we don't want to add empty bookmarks. Otherwise we can say const bookmark, because remember our post endpoint does add a new bookmark. So we can do the bookmark would be awaiting that request, which would be fetch, and this time we can get that URL, and then we give it some options, which is method of post, and the body would be URL and new bookmark dot value. So we got the new bookmark, and then all we have to do is, because we have a list of bookmarks, and another thing that I want to check is that bookmarks exists. So we can say if bookmarks value is equal to null, just return, because at some point while this is pending, this is nothing. So that won't happen if we see the actual data on the screen, but just as a precaution, we can check that. Okay, so what we can do now, because as you can see here, the reference is null or bookmark array. But now that we check for null, the typing will work a little bit better in this function. Okay, so now that we got the bookmark, we know that this is an array, and what we can say is just say our current bookmarks dot value dot push the new bookmark. And yeah, that's about it. So we got the new we created the new bookmark, and we're just adding it on the front end. Perfect. So let's see. Now we can just do an add click listener and say add bookmark. That looks good. Okay, so let's see what the website says. So let's do HTTPS. Oh, I need to fix that. So let's remove that new bookmark thing over here. Let's give this some space so that we can see what's going on. So that's a form that's loading, and that is when we have actual data. Okay, let's try again. Oops. All right, so let's do https youtube.com add, and boom, we have a bookmark. Very nice. So let's log out that bookmark as it comes back in over here. So we can just say console.log bookmark, and then go back to the app. Let's refresh this, and you can see as I refresh now, it still keeps the state, but that's just because the Nuxt server is still running. So if I do this and I just stop the server and run it again, you'll see that if I refresh this page, or if it refreshes by itself, it clears out the state. So let's do HTTPS. Let's open up DevTools, and I want to attach it to the side of my window. Okay, so if we do youtube.com again, we'll see we get a bookmark, and this bookmark has an ID, random ID that we generated. It has an icon with the URL and a version and the URL updated at and created at. Perfect, that's exactly what we wanted. So we could do, instead of logging this out, let's display the icon. So first of all, we need to add let's add an A tag, and then just give this the URL as well, because obviously we want to be able to follow the link. So we'll do bookmark.url, and the target equals blank, and then very important for security, no opener and no referrer. URL over there, and before the URL I want to add an image, and the source would be the bookmark.icon.url, and we can append the version to this, but for now I won't. We don't need this. And let's see what that looks like. It's probably going to be huge and ugly. Yep. So if we add another one, HTTPS, perhaps Twitter, you can see they have varying sizes. So let's fix that. I think let's do some styling perhaps. So let's check out what we want to do. We want to move this to the center over here. I think I like the darker background more, but if you prefer the light background, that's fine. And icons obviously need to be smaller, round and centered, and the form. Okay, so I think we can do this. This is basically just styling, and then we will add the we can add the the database. Sorry, I had a little bit of a blank moment over there. Okay, so let's do styles. and I'm going to give this some classes. I'm going to say class equals, I'm going to call this main container, bookmark form, and then we can just address those directly in the bookmark form. And then, yeah, so we have over here, we have a class of bookmark list, class of bookmark list item, and a class of bookmark link. I think those should be enough. All right, so let's start with font family, obviously. So I'm going to do just a star and say good old sans serif. Yeah, that's fine for now. And then we have the container, which I just want to make a specific width. So I'm going to do dot container would be a max width of, well, let's just make it fixed width of, let's do max width. And then I always forget, so it's the minimum. And then we'll just give it a margin block of auto. Let's see if this worked. No, it didn't. So I think this might have to be min. I think this has to be max though. So it can be maximum 95 or 600, whichever is smaller basically. Still not working. I think this, oh, it's not margin block, obviously, it's margin inline. Right? Yeah. Okay, that was a bit of a blonde moment. So there you can see it'll be that width until it gets to this size. Then it'll be that width. Okay, so let's do margin inline. And check if that worked. Okay, so it looks like it's pretty much centered. And then we can do so what we want to do with this form is just, it's already sort of centered full width now. What we want to do is give it a class of, or give it a styling of display flex, and just flex direction of column. Right. Oh, I called it bookmark form, not just form. There we go. And then we can do align center. I wonder why the art refresh isn't working. It's quite strange because it usually works pretty great. If you save a file, is there any errors? It says HMR, but it doesn't update. Anyway, okay, so we've got that, and then I'm just going to style the input a little bit. And I guess we don't have to be that specific. We can just do this, and then we can say dot bookmark form input and dot bookmark form button. We want a border of none. We want to give it some padding, and yeah, I guess. Ooh, the border none doesn't look that great. Let's just remove that for now. Oh, it's kind of annoying me that I can't do HMR. Maybe I should just restart this server. And maybe kill my other servers. Okay. Seems good. Yeah, so that's way too big. So top and bottom, we'll do that, and then, or maybe that's enough for both. Let's give them a fixed width just so they look the same. Why does the button, oh, because strange. Okay, anyway, so let's just do a margin bottom of 10 pixels. Oh, actually, because we've got a flex, we can just do gap of 10 pixels. And what else? So for the form, we might want a margin bottom of 50 pixels. And then I'm going to do some styling on the HTML. That just basically gets a background of, I don't know, let's do black and then just change it manually to like a dark blue type color, like around there. And give it a color of white. Okay, so that's not the prettiest thing in the world, but let's try and add, okay, so if I try and add like an invalid thing, it does sort of tell me that I need valid data, so that's fine. And then we need to add these bookmarks. So basically, let's see, let's start with this bookmark list. Okay, so the bookmark list has some default styling that we need to update. So we can do bookmark list and margin 0, padding of 0, and we can say list style none. See what that looks like. Okay, so we need a few bookmarks on here. Let's do https YouTube again. And we need to clear that out after we press enter. And maybe one more. Okay, so those are really ugly. And what we'll do is we'll go to the list. So dot bookmark list item, which is the LIs. And we might even just do image, I guess. And then the image will have an aspect ratio of 1. And the width would be 24 pixels perhaps. Height 24 pixels. We can give it a border radius of 100%. And then we can also say transition, because we want to add a little bit of a hover effect, so we can do transition all 100 milliseconds linear. And then all we can do now is just say bookmark list item image tag while it's being hovered, or we can do while this is being hovered, target the image tag, and just say that the border radius should be 3 pixels, and the scale should go up just a little bit, so we can do like 1.0, 1.05, something like that. Okay, so now if we hover, you can see the icons do like a little animation thing, and they all sort of look okay now, but this needs to be straightened out and white. So what I'm going to do is target the A tag, and this is going to have a text decoration, of none, and it's gonna have a font size of a little bit smaller. So I'm gonna do 0.75 rem, and I'm gonna give it a white color. And now we need to sort of align these things next to each other. So the bookmark item contains a and image, well, it contains the a. So the a needs to align these things. So what we can perhaps do is, I'm not sure if we can put a flex on an a tag, but we can try. So display flex and align items center, perhaps. And then just give it a gap of 10 pixels, not 1. Maybe 5. Let's make it a little smaller. Yeah, so that worked. Okay, so now the links are sort of in line and it looks good. If I click on super dense, it will take me there. That's fine. And I want to clear out this input after we add a bookmark. So the bookmark logic is over here. All we have to do is say new bookmark dot value equals empty. Perfect. So if I add something now, Facebook, I guess, empty. Great. And these might need a little bit of a bigger gap. So I'm going to do the item itself. I'm going to give it a little bit of margin, this time block of 10 pixels. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. So they don't overlap like that. And then HTTPS. What can we do? Producthunt.com. Boom. And if we refresh this, you can see the icons load pretty much instantly because there's some caching on them. And that's why I put the version param in, so that if we want to maybe fetch a new icon and not get the cache, then we can just use the version param. Okay, so that basically addresses the UI, but now we have a problem that every time we stop this server and we get invalid URL. Oops. So we do actually need to manually handle errors in that. So what we could do is just in the server API with create, we can do try catch and in this case just do error.message. Well, this is going to kind of screw up the response because now we have to check in the app.view, but this is the way you'll do it. You'll just return an error, and then app.view's return type over here would be 2 values. This could be 2 values. It could be a bookmark or it could be an error. Okay, but we're not going to do that for now. We'll just assume all our users are very good and just add correct URLs. Okay, so now what we want to do is add a database, and this is kind of a fun part. What we want to do with the database is we can import from no, not that, atdatabases sqlite. We want to import the, I think it's called connect, and it's called SQL from that. And what we want to do is let's create a DB instance, which would be a database connection, and we export a function called get database, I guess, and we give it a path, which is a string. And now what we want to do is just, we want to say if no DB, or we can do this, we can say return DB or connect to the path. And this path we need. So what I've done is I've just added a .env. No, I haven't. So I'm going to create a .env file, which should not go to your GitHub. So make sure it's in your .gitignore. And then in here, I'm just going to say database path equals, let's do home, Kaizen, and then I guess code, YouTube, and bookmarker data, and then db.sqlite. So this is the file that I've created right in the beginning of the video. This is the full path to this folder that it's in, but that's referencing this. So I'm also git ignoring this. So if you have to deploy this somewhere, you have to make sure that you have this folder available on that platform, or just change your path and create this in some other different path. But I'm not going to import like process.env. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Nuxt config, and I'm going to say, just to show you some runtime stuff. So runtime config is an object, and I'm going to say database file path would be, I'm going to do import env from node process. And mind you that these node process imports, there's a different deployment targets for Nuxt 3. So if you import things from node and you're running it in a different runtime, like I think Cloudflare workers or something like that, then you might need, it won't work. Okay, so let's just, but I'm going to assume I'm deploying for node. So I'm going to do env.database path. And the way we access that, so let's go to database. We have get database, we have to give it a path. So this will return us a database instance. We don't actually need this SQL for right now, or SQL. Let's go to our endpoint, to our bookmark. So we have to change this logic a little. What we need to do is import that definition or that type from @databases, and just the type of database connection. And what we want to do is give it every one of our functions. So basically list will now receive a DB, which would be a database connection, and add would receive a DB, which is a database connection. And we can import SQL now because we'll be using SQL. And what we want to do is, instead of returning bookmarks, so we can delete this bookmark array because we'll actually be storing bookmarks now. Instead of returning that, what we want to do is say db.query, and then SQL with template literals, and then we can say select star from bookmarks, and we'll have to create this table. Select star from bookmarks, and yeah, that's about it. So just give me all the bookmarks basically, and that gives promise any, but we should hard type this, and we'll do that in a second. Okay, so over here we have the bookmark, and then instead of pushing, we can say db.query, and then SQL with template literals. And I prefer this, no, I wouldn't say prefer, but I enjoy template, like literally writing queries out with this template literal, so that it also protects you from SQL injections and stuff like that. To me, using a full-blown ORM for this kind of example just doesn't make sense. So now I need to remember the syntax for this. So I think it's, and that's probably where an ORM will help you out. Okay, so insert into bookmarks, I think values, and then what we want to do over here is do ID. I think what we want to do is oh, first I need to define what's going in here. Okay, so let me put that there, and then over here I can do like something like that, and I'm gonna say ID URL, and then we can't have objects in SQL obviously, so we can do icon URL, icon version, created at, and updated at, and then values can have this line. Okay, so the values will have to be interpreted. So what I'm going to do is add them like this, which is kind of cool with string interpolation. Then we can just add the bookmark stuff. We can say bookmark.id and then the bookmark.url. What's happening? All right, so we can just do that. This is quite confusing that that's over there, but okay. And then we have to return, then we can return the bookmark. So we don't need to return, like query it from the database again. We can just return it, and we should await this in case something goes wrong. And we should probably, we don't need to await that. Okay, so how do we know that this database thing exists? So typically, now you can see there's some errors over here. Expected to arguments, so now we need to initialize the database and pass it along. But before we do that, I want to talk about the database. So typically in bigger apps, you'll have stuff called migrations, where you define a file with a function that runs your migration and checks in the database if this migration is run already and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just going to make this really simple. Not the best practice, I would say, but for this example it'll be okay. Just make sure to follow like the best practice of your database or ORM that you use. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just run a query before connecting. So I'm going to say await, I'll do const database equals db or that, and then I'm gonna, oh yeah, this has to be let. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have another variable called let initialized, just a little sanity check, which starts as false. And so, just so that I can import this into more than one file without it rerunning this migration type thing all the time. So I'm going to say if not initialized, which will be true in the beginning. Well, initialized will be false and this statement would be true. What we want to do is do a db.query, and we want to await this SQL of a super long thing. I think I'm going to copy this instead of writing it all out and just explain it. Okay, so basically what we're doing, this has to be a, so basically what we're doing in this statement is just, if this table does not exist called bookmarks, we create a table that has these properties. So we don't need a title, I'm not using that anymore, just these properties. The ID is a text, which is that random UID, and it's also the primary key. And then URL is not null text, and basically everything's not null text except the icon version, which we gave as a number, and created at, which is defaults to the current date when it gets created, and updated at. So only if not initialized we do that, and then we set initialized to true. So we know we don't have to rerun that again. And then we can just return the database. So now every time the first connect would be slow, or the first query once this thing starts up. So if we go to our create, we can do import from server source database, and then what we want to do is get the database. So you can see const db equals get db, And then the path would be, so this is where it gets interesting. So we can do const that equals use runtime config, which comes from our Nuxt config. And we can say, maybe we get some types. No. What do we call that? So we call that database file path. So over here in the create.post, we can say database file path. And then in DB, we need to pass that path. And then we have to pass the database to the function call. And then that fixes that. Oh, we have to await this, obviously. So the first call to this function would be async, because it doesn't matter, like basically the first person that opens up the app would trigger the import of this. It's probably better ways to do this, but for now I'll just do this. Then the complete first connection, there would be a no database connection, and they would be uninitialized. And the reason I'm doing it within the event handler instead of like a global thing is just sort of to get into that mindset of what if this isn't like a persistent state type thing? What if this is a connection that we have to make on every request, like a Vercel environment or something where you're running in a Lambda function that goes to sleep or something like that. So then on every request, you'd probably connect to your database. And in this case, if it's the first connection, database is undefined, initialized is false. So we have to set database to its value. And if it's undefined, we have to connect, which returns the same thing. And then if it's not initialized, we have to try and create that table if it doesn't exist. If it exists, this will just skip. And then we set initialize to true. So we don't have to try any of that again. And the next time someone connects, we already have the DB, and this will run pretty quick, a few milliseconds probably. And then we can just do the same thing over here. In every single endpoint we use, we can get the database. So let's say const DB. First of all, we need to get the file path. And then we can just say equals await get database and add that database file path. And then listing just requires the database. So basically we've sort of done this, I think. Let's see what happens if we do this. No bookmarks yet, there's no errors, so the database would have connected. Let's do https youtube.com, and nothing happened, so we probably errored. SQLite error near that syntax. So that's also one of the problems that I have with these templating things, like a loose comma can destroy your life. What is this? Does this need a semicolon? I'm assuming it's this one because the first one worked fine. So probably need a semi over here. See what happens. Try again. No, that's not it. Okay, debugging time. So there's no indication on to which line number this was or anything like that. Okay, so insert into bookmarks these values, and that is my dangling comma. Good gosh. Okay. Boom, added YouTube. Nice. Boom, Twitter. The Elanis. One more, let's do one more. Let's do my channel with my cool new little tag thing that I got. Nice. So you can see some drawbacks to this is, what if you have like a many YouTube channels or many things, and the icon would be kind of blurry. And that's actually the perfect segue into what I want to talk about next. So I guess if you yeah, if you enjoyed this, I mean, there's so much to do. You can make it editable, you can design it a little better, but I hope this sort of gave you just a little bit of insight into how to just build a mini little app with API endpoints. You've got like bookmarks with SQLite, and you can probably exchange this with Postgres or MySQL or something like that. Got some validation going. We've got some interfaces and some utilities, a nice little hidden API. Yeah, I mean, it's not the most robust Nuxt tutorial, but yeah, it was something. And so this is super dense. As you can see, it's a lot like what we just did, but it's got a lot of features. So there's no actual text. Just when you hover, you see like a little int at the bottom of what you're hovering on. But there's other cool things. Like let's say you have multiple YouTube stuff, so you can do / and then just search YouTube, and then it just hides the rest. You can do, if you want to like distinguish these icons, you can hold and click and give it a background of, let's say, white. Update that. You can see like this one has a white background now, this doesn't. So there's some cool things, and what's nice about this is you can also like reorder your bookmarks into 2 different categories, and the bookmarks themselves can move into different stuff, and if you cancel, it doesn't save your changes. And if one area isn't enough for you, you can do spaces. So I've got 2 spaces, a home space and a workspace, and you can see the workspace only has 1 category, so I can do like a test over here. And then if we add a bookmark, we can do HTTPS, our favorite. You'll see it only has one category, so you can separate stuff by spaces as well. And what's awesome is you get a 100-day free trial if you want to try it out. So obviously I have a higher plan, and with that you get like custom domain. You can point your own domain to your app. You can add your own custom logo, disable branding and stuff like that. They get a complete own account on your basis. And what's another cool thing is you can see mine has like this background and everything, and that's because I've added it over here. But if you don't want to do CSS by doing like inspect and stuff, and you just want to style it a little bit on your own, you can always go to select a new background, and then we've integrated with Unsplash, and you can get like hundreds of free backgrounds over here. You can make colors or gradients or whatever. So I'm just going to cancel that. You can change your icon size. You can import from your browser bookmark bar. You can import that file. If you go to Bookmark Manager, export, that file uploads, and you can sort of categorize them. You can export all your bookmarks. Yeah, I mean, you can make, so the URL that you add gets a public URL. So if I go to this public URL, you'll see there's less categories because this is what I want to have public. So if I go back to the app version, when you click on something like this, you can say toggle public, and then it gets a green dot, which just means it's public now, and it will be available on that. I don't want to have that public though. Like, let's say I want to embed something on my own website as a way to share with people. I can do embed, and then just copy that code, paste it on my website, and share my specific category with people. So that's pretty cool. Every workspace gets its own sort of URL with a custom domain, and if you don't have a custom domain, you can still get it on superdense.com/your username. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to do with this, and it was a fun little project for us you can have multiple columns as well. So if I add a new column, it makes 4 columns, and you can only go up to 4, otherwise it gets a little bit squished. But yeah, fun little project I've been working on for the past 2 years. It's free for 100 days if you want to try it out. We've just had like a launch on AppSumo as well for a lifetime deal if you want to buy something, but I really don't mind if you don't buy it. You can just try it out, let me know. It's just fun having having people use your stuff. We've made some good progress in terms of user base and everything. So yeah, if you want to try it out, go right ahead. The link is in the description. Anywho, that was a big segue. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you maybe learned something. If there's anything I can improve on in terms of what I say or what I do, anything you want to see, just hit me up in the comments. And yeah, have a great day and see you next time.